the leader of the climb climbed the tower, and he had to rappel down the other side.
He's telling you the story of how he also got kicked out of the CMC.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just forewarning
That's the subtext here, yeah.
that
So-
because he didn't follow the rules.
Welcome to the Greens and Blues 14er podcast. This episode, Zach and I get to sit down and talk with the legendary doctors Gerry and Jennifer Roach. Well, Zach, my friend, how are you doing this fine day?
Well, I'm doing great, Eric, but part of that is because of the guests we have on today's show. I do not know what magic you wove into the universe, how you manifested this, but our guests today are a couple hiking legends, Gerry and Jennifer Roach. Their accomplishments go beyond Colorado. They are guidebook authors. For those of you that don't know, there's probably two different authors that wrote definitive guides to Colorado's 14ers. Dawson is one and Gerry Roach is the other. I grew up reading his guidebooks, and somehow we got to talk to these people. I felt like I was in the presence of heroes, and I kind of was. So, yeah, I can't believe we got to do this, dude. This is huge. What are your feelings, Eric? Tell me how you feel.
No, I agree. I'm fully in fanboy mode. We were fortunate enough to speak with Tim and Carrie Cooney a while back, and they suggested, hey, do you guys want to speak with the Roaches as well? And we said, yeah, that would be wonderful.
The email back and forth between you and me was like, oh, yes, in all caps. And then you sent back this very low-key response. Yeah, that sounds nice. And the whole time I'm like, Eric, you're playing this down too much. This is huge.
Meanwhile, I'm peeing my pants in the corner wondering, what am I going to do when I'm actually speaking with Jennifer and Gerry Roach? I'm just going to curl up into a ball and not be able to speak. So, yeah, a lot of fun. They had lots of great stories and just really, I feel like I say this for a number of the guests that we speak with who are a bit on the higher profile side, really approachable.
Yes.
I walked in a bit nervous, how are we going to interact with these folks and are they going to be fun to speak with? They were amazing to speak with. They were so kind. They were so approachable. It was wonderful.
Yeah, disarmingly cool. Just one would not blame them for talking to a couple plebes like us and maybe talking down to us, but no one has ever done that. By the way, they were so fun and open. And as you guys will hear when you listen to the interview here, it started out, we just started talking. And at some point we hit record. And that's how it went. I want to say up front, the hard part about thinking about an interview like this is, what do you want to talk about? If anyone wants to, they can go to Gerry Roach's website. I think it's Gerry and Jennifer's website, climb.mountains.com. And go to the list of climbing accomplishments that Gerry has. It's just Gerry. This is not to mention Jennifer, who has climbed every 13er and 14er in Colorado. I believe every high point in the United States. She's done probably countless 12ers as well. She's probably the most accomplished climber we've talked to, except for Gerry Roach. And you then go to Gerry's website and look at his list of accomplishments, and it's breathtaking. Not only has he done all of that, he's written about a lot of it he's written about 14ers and 13ers in guidebooks, but he's written memoirs as well, like his book Transcendent Summits. Those are full of his accomplishments and stories. And so the question for Eric and I going into this was how the heck do we try to condense this into an hour and a half? And as you guys will see, there's no way. We just let Gerry and Jennifer tell stories. We tried to hone in on a few things. I'm such a nerd. I really love how Gerry writes guidebooks.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's probably an art to writing a guidebook, knowing that someone will read it over and over. And he's mastered it.
Mm-hmm.
And I deeply appreciate him as a writer. And so I had some questions on that. But like, we could have done 4 more of these. And heck, maybe we will in coming years. Like, I would never turn that down. But
Oh, yeah.
I thought this is probably TMI, but like, if I get nervous, I sweat. And like, when we got done with the podcast, I like had to go take a shower. I was just like, it was, I had a window open and a fan on me, and it was like 40 degrees, and I was still sweating. I was so nervous. So this was fantastic.
Well, Zach, that sounds like a great transition to break into part 1 of our interview with Jennifer and Gerry Roach. Well, we're here today with, I don't even know how to describe both of you, authors, mountaineering legends, poets, Jennifer and Gerry Roach. Thank you for joining the Greens Blues podcast today.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
I love to tell my stories.
I'm looking forward to it. We're here for all of them.
I moved to Boulder in 1954. And my buddy and I looked up at the Flatirons and said, I wonder if a guy could climb those rocks.
and that's how it started, right?
That's how it started.
And where are you from originally, Jennifer?
I'm from Chicago,
Oh, really?
Skokie.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I moved here in 1980.
Okay.
After my first marriage was kind of going down the tubes, I said, well, I'm moving. I moved to Denver, and I lived there for a long time until Gerry and we got married in 1998. We just had our 27th wedding anniversary. So,
wow, congratulations.
Wow,
congratulations. Thank you. Yeah. And then we decided to move to Montrose in 2012 when things started getting extremely expensive in Boulder.
You don't say.
So,
Yeah.
you don't say. I know. That's how it is. Anyway, that's how we got here.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
if I may wind back a little bit to Gerry and then to you, Jennifer. So Gerry, I've heard you tell this story before, but you get to Boulder when you're a kid.
Right.
And that kind of ignites a passion for hiking. So what's that journey like?
Well,
how old are you when you moved to Boulder in 1954?
I've been climbing since I was 13,
How old were you, though, when you moved to Boulder?
6th grade. So my buddy and I, Jeff Wheeler, we looked up at the Flatirons and we said, I wonder if a guy could climb those rocks. So we snuck up there. We didn't need a driver's license because we could walk up there.
Mm-hmm.
We killed ourselves.
Were you trying to rock climb even at that age?
Yeah.
With your mom's clothesline or Jeff's
We
mom?
borrowed the clothesline, which was a cotton rope. We learned later it wouldn't even hold body weight. We'd sneak up there. Jeff would tie a string to his big toe and hang it out the window. I could sneak out of my bedroom window easier than he could. And I'd yank on the string, he'd pass out the pack, and then he'd climb out the window. Then we'd walk up the street toward the Flatirons. Well, Jeff's mom had bionic ears. She heard our boots on the street. 2 blocks later, Mr. Wheeler showed up in the family Oldsmobile. He said, where are you going? Oh, just for a little hike. Well, but we forgot we had a rope over our shoulder. And he said, with a rope? So we were busted. I thought that was the end of my climbing career. A couple weeks later, the parents said, you can climb, but you got to get proper training. Proper training back then was the
Rocky Mountain.
Rocky Mountain Rescue Group, which was a bunch of college students, and we were 7th or 8th graders. We were known as the Squirrels because we were pretty good on rock. So we had a lot of friends in college. Then we went to the original Hollybar store was in the basement of their house.
They might not know what Holly Bar, that's so long
Yeah,
ago.
what is that?
Holly Bar is a long time ago.
It's the original mountaineering store.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was in Denver when I moved to Denver in 1980, but they were quickly replaced by North Face.
So
they went out
wow.
of business.
So we went ding dong at the front door. Alice Holly Bar met us at the door. We told our story. She about fainted. Brought us down to the basement. You need a rope, a real rope. You need pitons and a hammer and blah, 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 blah. We had paper routes. We made a little money, but not enough to buy all that stuff. We said, we can't afford all that stuff. She said, well, you've got to have this book. It's an ancient book. I don't think it's out anymore. Belaying the Leader. She gave us the book. Jeff and I flipped for it at 16th and Columbine. He read it under the covers that night. And we went up to the second Flatiron the next day. And he disappeared around a corner and went up the pitch. And I came up and I looked at him and he was running the rope around his waist. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm belaying you.
That's great.
So that's how it all started.
Oh my gosh.
Those are pretty humble beginnings. I mean, was it love at first sight? Like when you saw the mountains, was it just, where'd you come from before 1954?
Well, I came from California where I was born, and my dad had an observatory on Fritz Peak, which is above Rollinsville. His research was the air glow, which is the southern version of the aurora. You need instruments to see it. So we had an observatory on top of Fritz Peak. I would climb up the face and I'd be there at night and I'd stare up at Beacon Peak, which was a peak that had a light on it so that airplanes didn't crash into the Continental Divide.
Wow.
It's not there anymore.
Well, Beacon Peak is, but
Beacon Peak is still there, but the light's gone.
Yeah.
I said, I've got to climb those mountains.
So it's just kind of, you've always been a mountain kid.
Yeah, I joined the Boy Scouts. That didn't last very long.
he can't follow the rules.
They're not going to have you send a class 5 pitch when you're 13 years old either in the Boy Scouts. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So we went to a camp just at the beginning of the mountains, and we climbed up the cliff, and we stood on top of the cliff and cheered. The leader didn't like that. He sent up a college student who came up on the side and he said, you better get down there. The master's really mad. So we came down. He assigned us a compass course. He said, I'll give you one more chance. You got to complete this compass course. So he gave us a whole bunch of directives. And so we went around in the woods. We came back into the field and we got to the point where we thought we were done. And we looked at each other. This is me and Jeff.
Yep.
And we said, it can't end here. There's no spot. Got to end over on that bump of rocks. So we walked over to the bump of rocks and said, we're done. The scoutmaster said, but you stopped over there. So, but we finished here. Well, that was the end of my Boy Scout career.
So you start climbing with the kind of learning the ropes, literally, as it were, in Boulder.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah.
And at what point does that become hiking bigger peaks? I mean, obviously the Flatirons are, for an Oklahoma guy, they're plenty big, but when does it become something bigger?
Well, we had all these college friends and they went up to Long's Peak and we climbed Alexander's Chimney, which was the standard climbing route back in those days.
For the east face.
And we did pretty well on that. Then I got the thing in my head that after I reached Broadway, I always had to go to the summit of the peak. So we went up the upper Keeners which had a little fifth class at the beginning, and then it was fourth and third. And then we came down the north face because we had ropes and we could rappel down. So I climbed Long's Peak something like 12 times before I ever did the keyhole route.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Because we always descended the north face. I don't know if anybody else could claim that.
Probably not. Yeah, that's a very talented beginning. Like you're clearly good at it. You start doing longs a lot and you obviously have a love for it. What is it about the summit? I take it the other guys were like they'd climb up to Broadway and then they'd just go down.
Right, right.
But Gerry's got to go to the top. Why is that?
Well, that was because I had to climb the mountain.
A completion thing.
A completion thing.
Yeah.
We had a friend, Prince, who always preached safety. Every time he talked to us, he'd preach safety. Well, he went on a desert trip. They came back and they decided to climb the east face of Long's Peak because it was spring break. Well, that wasn't a good idea. They got up on the summit in a blizzard.
Oh
boy.
And they came down and they had to bivouac. Prince's hands froze and he told Jane, there was a woman on the trip, and Dave, that they had to save themselves because he couldn't help them. So they took off, but they made a mistake. They didn't do the keyhole route. They went straight down into Wild Basin. There was a bunch of boilerplate slabs in there. And Jane said, get back at the back of the ledge, put it in an anchor, and because I'm going to fall. She got about halfway down. She did fall. She looked up, and Dave was standing right at the hairy edge, not anchored. And so she pulled him off. So they both fell down to the bottom of the boilerplate slab and hit snow, which saved them. She survived, dug herself out, tried to find Dave, but he was completely buried. She pulled on the rope and dug a little, and she couldn't find him. So she took off to save herself, and she spent the whole next night hiking out of Wild Basin. Got to the road the next morning, got a ride. We saw her at the Boulder CU Health Center.
Mm-hmm.
In the hospital.
It was kind of a hospital, yeah. Then Prince tried to save himself, but he fell and he died.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
That was the man who had preached safety all our life had died. That was a big event in our life.
Mm-hmm.
It made the safety even more important. This story is in my book, Transcendent Summits.
I was going to ask about that and the orthogonal adventures at some point. So, yeah.
Well, Transcendent Summits was my first narrative. I had written guidebooks, but I had not told my stories. So I told my stories in Transcendent Summits. We climbed the Nisqually Icefall, the sixth ascent of that route. We got to the top. We started down. Somebody said, we got to go back to the top and find a steam cave. I thought, what?
Excuse me?
So we went back up 1,000 feet, back across the crater, started digging. We, in fact, found a steam cave. There were 6 of us. We all crawled in there. It was a big cave. We spent 2 nights in there, hoping the storm would abate. It didn't. One of the guys with us was a guide on Rainier, and he knew the route better than the rest of us, but we had to get the heck out of there the second morning. So we did. We got out of there, we roped up, and the rope was frozen, and all I could do was a big half hitch. And we got over across the crater and started down the steep part. In the meantime, a couple had joined us. Well, we could not find the gal's ice axe. It was buried in the snow. So I got behind the gal, and I probably saved her life about 50 times because she was going down the steep part without an ice axe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And she kept falling, and I would stop her because I had crampons and an ice axe. And I expected her to fall, and she did, and I would stop her. I don't know, I haven't stayed in touch with that lady. She's probably still telling this story.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of dig a little bit more also into Jennifer's story. You moved to Denver in 1980?
In 1980, yeah. I went to school in downstate Illinois, Charleston. I went to Eastern Illinois University, and I was living in Charleston at that point, but I was pretty young. I ended up moving to Colorado.
So did you ever hike until you moved to Colorado, Jennifer?
No.
Oh, wow.
No, I mean, I like being outdoors.
Yeah.
But in terms of doing anything, I tell you what, I tried a few things on my own. I went to Rocky Mountain National Park a few times and found local trails and tried to figure out what could I do here that's safe enough for a real novice. And did a few hikes, but some friends of mine introduced me to another friend of theirs, and he said to me, "You really need to join the Colorado Mountain Club because they'll really teach you everything." So I joined the Colorado Mountain Club in 1981. And so I started going out with them. And the minute that I joined that club, I never had a boring weekend afterwards. I'd go out, it's like I'd go out both days. Didn't matter how tired I was from Saturday. I'm going on Sunday. I don't care what they're doing. And we had a bazillion trips in those days. We had so many things to choose from, all levels. And I just acquainted myself with people, and typically it was a peak hike of some kind. That's kind of how it started with me.
So you joined the club and you're just off and running.
Yeah. I really liked it. I like being outside.
It sounds like you both share this kind of instant love of the mountains.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. I don't think we could have gotten married otherwise.
I don't think that was going to work unless
one of us wouldn't have been home at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We met in 94.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was doing a slideshow at CU.
No, you were doing a slideshow for the CMC.
Oh, the CMC.
Annual dinner in
annual
Denver.
dinner.
I brought my Rocky Mountain. Oh, here it is, right here. I brought this. These are scarce as hen's teeth now. You can't even get these. I mean, we've got a couple of them. This was the original format of the Rocky Mountain.
Oh, wow.
Rocky Mountain National Park guidebook. And I mean, mine was so dog-eared, and we were using it all the time. We were going out, what does Roach say about the route, and
Boy, that phrase has been repeated many a time in my life as well, right?
My books from you guys are dog-eared all over the place.
Yeah.
Here they are,
very
right?
dog-eared. Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
And there you see. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, just all the routes were spot on. I was really excited when I heard, oh, he's going to speak at our annual dinner. Oh, I can't believe it. I went up there with my guidebook for him to sign it. And I was going to tell him about a particular climb that we had just done, that blow by blow description. It was perfect. And I don't know, it was eyes locked. And he gave me a business card, and that's all it took. And I had coveted this business card for a while.
The old business card trick.
Yeah.
How do I get him alone? The old saying.
Yeah.
So anyway, but we both had obviously the same ideas.
Now, Gerry, you're obviously super well established at that point as a pretty world-class climber, but had you been climbing 13ers before you met Jennifer?
Some, but not all. I met Jennifer, and she was trying to finish all of the 13ers.
Wow.
She'd done all the high ones, and she was working on the low ones. So I went with her on the low ones.
These are tougher.
And they required research.
And patience. And a lot of driving.
I got into the lower 13ers with Jennifer.
Was that kind of like a reignition of a passion? Because I've heard you tell stories and I've read your books and stuff, and it seems like part of the joy early on about 14ers was the art of climbing it, right? Going out and finding a route, reading a map. And now these days, obviously 14ers don't require a lot of that, but 13ers still do.
Right.
Was it part of reigniting that old flame?
Right. Yes, we had to figure out every peak.
And then when we worked on the 13er guide together, Garrett and Martin had their 13er guide out. But when we did this one, it was more or less the top 200. When we started working on it, we quickly discovered that, wow, lots has changed, and the works of man, roads changed, trailheads changed. There were always property boundary problems, things to research. It wasn't just a slam dunk. So, but Gerry, my name's on that book, yes. And I have my pictures all over the place in there.
It is. I was looking at it today and I was like, in many ways, this is kind of like a love story to the mountains. Like there's there's a lot of pictures of Jennifer looking out on mountains in that book.
Yeah. Gerry did all the writing for that though. I mean, I didn't write a word of it. I just sort of went with him to get these top 200 done. And I did some repeats on some pretty hard peaks. That's why I've done Jagged twice, is because I went back and he had already done it, but we decided the best way to write this peak up is we got to go do it again. And it was even harder the second time. I remember being, and that's when I was braver about all that stuff. I'm not a rock climber, so.
For not being a rock climber, you've done a lot of rock climbing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It was never my forte. It's still not.
Yes, it is.
I was gonna say I want to meet a rock climber then. If you're not one, then goodness.
It was good to do that book with him because we really went over everything with a fine-tooth comb, and it was nice.
It's the top 100.
I have so many questions, probably like Jennifer, Gerry. I've fallen in love with you through your writing. But
so nice.
I mean, I know you were a computer programmer for a long time, and I've heard that it said that that's a language, but
yes,
you have a real facility with the English language. Eric knows this. I've been nerding out about your writing style for years. And as a professor, I like that stuff. But there's like you mentioned the Gerrett and Martin book. I've got that book too.
Yes.
It's great, but it's so spare.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And
that was they left a lot of it up to you.
Yeah, there's a kind of economy there that's like basically here's the trailhead, here's how far it is, here's where you go right.
You go figure it,
And Gerry's always kind of struck, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, Gerry. You've always kind of struck this balance between like you're not giving the blow by blow, but you're also saying, at this point you're going to want to make sure you drop below this this tower to the right.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
And you've always struck that balance between those. Like your 14er guide is kind of seminal, I think, for that reason. Where did that come from?
Well, it's just being accurate. Back in the 50s, we made what may have been the first traverse from Little Bear to Blanca. Probably been done before.
Wow.
But we did it. Since Jeff and I were rock climbers, we scooted ahead.
You were with a CMC group.
We were with a CMC group.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to this tower. We looked around to the right, no good. We looked around to the left. Oh, there was a route around to the left. So we roped up and we went around to the left. And then we sat down, coiled the rope, hollered for the other people to come around to the left. Well, they didn't. The leader of the climb climbed the tower and he had to rappel down the other side.
He's telling you the story of how he also got kicked out of the CMC. I mean, I'm just forewarning.
That's the subtext here, yeah.
Because he didn't follow the rules.
We had done the easy way. They did the hard way. In the book, I call it the Captain Bivouaco Tower.
Yes, this whole time I was like, is that how it got
There it is.
that's its unofficial name now because of you?
Yeah.
I love it. And you're going to get left by the CMC, apparently.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and you'll get kicked out of the CMC.
We
Yeah.
went on to Blanca and came down the standard way. Then, to my dismay, I was thrown out of the CMC.
But now that's kind of the definitive route, right? Because
yeah.
that's how you described that. It's one of your 4 classic traverses.
Yes, it is.
And that's how you described it, right?
Right. It may be the hardest of the 4 because it has some 5th class moves on it. So my dad is reading the CMC, whatever.
It's like their credo, that they have on the back. Yeah.
He says, this doesn't say anything about climbing mountains. It's got to be leave no trace, blah, blah, blah.
So I told you something more there. He also got kicked out of the CMC. He is in the CMC now, though.
So I got
one would hope.
It took about 50 years, but a friend of ours got
took about 50
reinstated.
years. I'm now a lifetime member.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
Emeritus.
Right.
Yeah, emeritus. Yeah, that's a good word.
So that's another story. What we learned by getting kicked out of the Boy Scouts and the CMC was that you had to figure things out for yourself. You couldn't depend on somebody else.
You say you're accurate, and you are. Like, I've never been led astray by your guide. But there's a different art to writing a guidebook because, I don't know, when Tolstoy writes War and Peace, he thinks, well, maybe somebody will read this once.
Yeah, right.
But when you write a guidebook, people are going to read that over and over, kind of like Jennifer and her Rocky Mountain Guide.
Right.
And I call them Gerryisms. You're not only accurate, though, you're not giving yourself credit. Like, you've got little, like the Tour de
Boulder.
Tour de Boulder. Or
that's actually not that's not mountaineering. That was for me that he did that. But
okay, in the 13er book, like you name a bunch of the routes around Iowa and Emerald Peak after constellations.
Right.
Like Arcturus, and there's little elements in there that are really poetic.
There's a poetry.
Yeah. And
right.
And where does is that just that's how you've always wanted to write?
Or around Jupiter, the 13er Jupiter, there's some Io and because those are the moons of Jupiter.
Then if you have several lined up, there's a tour to all the peaks.
Yep.
Yeah. Or Massive Mania, if you do the whole.
Massive Mania,
you should.
Oh yeah.
It's
I have
a
done
long
that.
Day.
I did it because Gerry told me to do it.
Oh, that's right. Oh, good. See, I will obey. I will obey.
I mean, where does that come from? Like, was that when you first started writing, that was just how you wanted to write a guidebook?
Well, my first real guidebook was Flatiron Classics. It was a rock climbing guide to the Flatirons. And I worked on it for many, many years because there's so many rocks. And I about gave up a couple of times, and I thought, I can't get through all these rocks. And I thought maybe I should do 2 books. Persisted, and I made it 1 book. Sadly, it's out of print right now.
It was a CMC Press
The
had it.
CMC Press took it from Fulcrum, and they are not going to reprint it. So I got to get a hold of the CMC and say, well, can I produce it myself?
Yeah.
We'll see about that, but
We'll see about that.
That's a big hurdle. But yeah, and then the Archbagger Guide.
Oh, the Archbagger Guide. You're not supposed to climb the arches in Arches National Park. But I did them all.
He didn't get kicked out, though. They never caught him.
Oh, that one didn't get you kicked out. All
Yeah,
right.
well, because he didn't get caught.
Yeah, there you go.
We never got caught. We were clever. So I wrote this little book and I self-produced it. I still have a few copies hanging around. I sold one for $300 to a bookstore in Moab. It was Fulcrum, my original publisher. They knew about it and they said, well, that's an illegal book. We can't publish it. So it's never been published by a real publisher.
That's fascinating. There's a lot of times too where in your books you kind of use this voice of like, this is a beautiful route, it's elegant, and then you use 2 words. You say climate.
climb it.
And there are days for climbing and there are days for being quiet and wandering.
Right.
Those days are important too. Like sometimes you use this voice of like, it's almost like you're speaking to the reader. Like you're using imperative voice. Like here's what you really need to have in your head when you hike that.
Right. Well, Jagged is one of the 100 highest. Back in the late 70s, I started the Outdoor Pursuits program at Fort Lewis College in Durango. I took students up Jagged.
Whoa.
Yeah, we started the Outdoor Pursuits program, and we did a big 2-week trip through the mountains, and we ended up with Jagged. Well, we had done rock climbing training along the way, so I figured I can climb this route with the students. So I did. We all made the summit. We all got down safely.
Oh, wow.
I would say of all the 13ers, I would think that sometimes I think of Jagged as being the penultimate, or just the most complete 13er in terms of being it's difficult to get at. It's difficult to climb, extremely beautiful, dangerous, if for different reasons. Chances of getting a thunderstorm in the summer are pretty good.
Yeah.
Gerry and I got off that thing with moments to spare. We dove into our tent. It just as bam, this big storm started.
Oh, wow.
It just, it's just one of the neatest 13ers. I'm at this point in my life now, I look back on it and think, I'm so glad I was able to climb it twice.
Yeah. I mean, even the approach to that is class 2+ in the guidebook. Like just even leaving the terrain and getting into the basin.
Yeah. It's just a long way back there. There's a couple of ways you can go, but they're all long and they all take a while. If I went back and did it today, I guess with a lot of help and about 30, along with a whole entourage of people trying to belay my sorry old butt up there, I guess I could do it. But when I think back now, it takes a lot of energy, mental energy, just to say, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Back in 1963, when I was going to the University of Washington in Seattle, I lived in a little house called Wilbur's. It's full of 10 climbers. So we never had to worry about climbing partners. My roommate was a climber, and we congregated and climbed Mount McKinley the next summer.
Just as one does.
Not a problem.
Yeah, no problem at all. We just climbed Mount Denali. That's just a lark.
We flew in with Don Sheldon, rest in peace, Don Sheldon. We were going to walk out because we didn't have money to fly out.
Wow.
So we made the summit at 10 p.m. late. Springate froze his toes coming down. He couldn't walk out. So Jeff and I decided we would walk out. We tried to radio out. We couldn't reach anybody. Jeff and I started down the Kahiltna, but we went about a few miles, then it peels off and there's a big crevasse zone. And we got into the crevasse zone and we said, this is too dangerous. So we went back to base camp. Somebody had heard one of our calls and had called Sheldon. Sheldon was as usual, he was in the air 10 minutes later. He came in and got us and we flew out and we said, we don't have $80 to pay you. And he says, well, man, send it to me later.
Now I think to fly out, it would cost you about $880 or
$200 or $300, yeah.
More.
So we flew out and Springate went to the hospital to deal with his toes. I went to the University of Alaska in Fairbanks where I had a job and I spent the rest of the summer there. And if you climbed on top of the main building, you could see Denali. So I went up there all the time.
Wow. Is that what inspired your quest for the highest peaks of North America?
Kinda, a little bit. Somewhere along the line, I decided I had to climb the 10 highest peaks in North America. Well, that's a long list.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of tough peaks. Mount Logan is probably the toughest. So I completed that, but I had done Sanford, Bona, 16ers. I call them the sexy 16ers. That made it up to 13.
Wow.
And I finished that in 2004. Took a lot of time.
That concludes part 1 of our interview with Gerry and Jennifer Roach. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back in our usual 2 weeks with part 2 of our interview with Gerry and Jennifer Roach. In the meantime, if you want to check out their website, it's climb.mountains.com. Or if you want to read any of Gerry and Jennifer's amazing books, you can go to their Amazon page, where you'll find not only guidebooks to Colorado's 13ers and 14ers, Lost Creek Wilderness, the Front Range, the Indian Peaks Wilderness, and so forth, but also some of Gerry's memoirs and diaristic storytelling regarding his amazing climbing career. So we will see you again in a few weeks for part 2 of our interview with Gerry and Jennifer Roach.